been in the music business for more than 38 years and sold more than 100 million albums with his group KISS. He's here today to speak with me. Paul Stanley of KISS, welcome to you.
It's great to be here.
More than 3,000 licenses you own in partnership with Gene Simmons. More than 100 million albums sold. Over $500 million in merchandising sales since 1973. Was that the vision when you were a kid in New York with Gene Simmons? Was that your vision?
I think the vision was always to be the biggest, the best, and to stand on the shoulders of the bands that we looked up to. In one sense, we wanted to be the Beatles. We wanted to be four individuals where people could love the band collectively, but also find a favorite member.
Come on and love me.
Certainly we never, and I had never wanted to follow rank. I wanted to start my own parade.
And of course, you were known for the makeup, the star on your eye, and the star child, as they called you. Where did the concept for the makeup come from?
We were in a time where there had been this great British invasion where bands looked terrific. And when you saw a band, invariably you knew that a member of the Stones wasn't in the Beatles because the Beatles looked one way, the Stones looked another way. All bands seemed to have their own calling card as far as identity. We wanted to take that a step further, and the makeup seemed like the perfect way for each one of us to come up with a character that symbolized and embodied us as individuals. Now, that being said, no individual in the band could have come up with their makeup without the other three members there. There was a synergy, that made all this happen.
And when you had the makeup, did you really have anonymity?
Well, it's a funny question because people think that off stage it was Clark Kent and Superman and we could just go walking around. And the truth of the matter is, it probably worked to my advantage because I could separate myself and say there's me off stage and me on stage, and the look is different. But, if you see a guy walking down the street who's 6 foot plus with black hair down to here and platform boots, you go, either he's a member of KISS or the circus is in town. So anonymity, no. But being able to separate myself, yes.
And now when you look at the music industry now, all of these groups are fighting to have the same kind of presence that KISS had because the sales have slowed down in the music industry. When you look back at that period, was the merchandising bringing in more money than the music itself at any period?
Not for us. They all went hand in hand together. It's very, very tough for any band now to, let alone succeed, but make any kind of money. There's just less money available. Record companies blew it when they didn't stop sampling and file sharing and all this other nonsense before it got out of hand. So now record companies are scrambling to basically put bands into slavery so that they can make the money that they've lost. It's unfortunate because as much as somebody who's aspiring to be a successful musician might want to say, I'm just doing this for the music, when they can't pay their rent, they're going to think, well, the money also helps. And at some point, you're going to need, the money to fund your career and to keep it going forward.
And I just want to clarify, when you talk about record companies signing artists into slavery, that you're probably talking about 360 deals in which they sign a contract which allows the record company not only to get the revenues from the album, but also everything else, the merchandising, the touring, sure, and everything else that they do.
Sure, you become an indentured servant. It's unfortunate, and it's the record company trying to make up for their lack of due diligence when they could have saved their own hides. This whole idea that's propagated that people are file sharing. Things like that are absolute nonsense. You can't share what you don't own. I can't say I'm sharing your transportation and steal your car. It's a great sounding term, but this whole idea of mass distributing something that somebody doesn't have any rights to is insane. Or trying to back it up by saying, I or someone else have enough money that it shouldn't matter. Let me be the one to determine that. I worked my butt off to get to where I am, and I'll set the ground rules.
So what is the solution for record companies?
I really don't know at this point. I don't know what the future holds. I worry more about the bands that don't have the same access to the public, and who, if they have a chance to put out product, are shackled in so many ways that that pot of gold isn't there for them. And that's very important. At some point, you need that financial security. It's very good to say, I'm in it for the music, but it's the music business. And if you're not in it for everything, if you're not in it for the business, there's somebody who's as talented at taking your money as you are at making it.
You're not one to be pigeonholed. The fact that we're sitting around your work and your art, that you're constantly, when you're not recording music, creating these beautiful pieces of art, is a testament to that. Tell me about your art.
I started painting about 10 or 11 years ago, and I was going through some personal problems, and interestingly, a friend of mine who knows me very well said, you should paint. And I don't know why that resonated with me. I went out and bought canvases and paints and brushes and palette knives and all that you would go buy in an art store, although I didn't know how to paint.
Really?
Yeah. The only rule I had was no rules. I didn't know what I was doing. The only limitation was the edge of the canvas. Whatever went onto the canvas was a way for me to get in touch with myself. I never had any notions or aspirations to do art shows.
You didn't even sign your first painting?
No, my first painting, which is hanging in the house, was not signed. And not signed to this day, because it's a reminder to me of how this all started. But when I did put it up, it was amazing how many people would come over and say, who did that painting? It was very interesting. When I started doing art shows, the pieces were selling at a tremendous rate, and people were connecting with the art. That's what's important. Success to me is only a way to measure your connection to the public. If you're doing something right, it connects. I live by something I call the law of commonality, which basically says, in short speak, people have more in common with each other than differences. And if you can tap into something in yourself, into a need in yourself, fulfilling that need, you will fulfill a need in other people. So by painting, and by painting truly and solely to please myself, I knew that there had to be other people out there who would like it. If you try to second guess the public, you may wind up kicking yourself and saying, I should have done it my way. So if you just follow your own gut and your own intuition, you'll usually land on your feet. So I define myself by the challenges I take on, and usually I do pretty well.
And you have done very well. You haven't allowed people to put you in a box. And even coming out here and seeing your life here, you have 4 kids, you are a painter, you're a musician, and you're not ashamed to call yourself a businessman.
What to be a businessman does not go against ethics. You know, if you're an ethical person, if you're a moral person, if you have a conscience, if you're involved with the world, if you're involved with charity, business may be the key to it all. That's how we get to give back. You know, I think we heal ourselves by giving. Success without giving back is success that's unwarranted.
How long did it take for you and Gene to get ownership of your careers, to really have ownership?
We were always savvy enough to be aware of what was going on around us. We've always been, and I've always believed that you have to be diligent and vigilant. You know, most people succeed once, and if you don't take advantage of that success, you'll be one of those whatever happened to stories on VH1. So it's, you know, I can't stress enough that it's really not just about music. When you talk 360, I just go, of course, the 360 deal is mine because I created everything. Why would I be giving that away to people who had nothing to do with it? Often if we need an outlet, we can find the outlet, whether we make a deal with a large retail chain. We're luckily and thankfully at a point now where we don't need a record company. We can bypass the record company and go immediately to retail.
And in 2009, you had a record called Sonic Boom that went to the top of the Billboard charts after all of the years that you've been in this business. But you also did a lot of touring. You did some touring in support of that album. Then you did another tour in 2010 and 2011, more touring. Now you have this new album coming out. You'll do touring about, for that album. Tell me about that. How important is that for a band like Kiss?
I think for a band like Kiss, but more specifically for Kiss, it's very important to tour because after our longevity and how long we've been successful, we actually become more, for lack of a better term, immortal by going back out there. When we go on stage and you see the band 30 years later and say, they look the same, they sound better, it makes us more into superheroes. And we've always been, I would liken us to Superman with a guitar. We're superheroes who also play music. So anytime we step out on that stage, mouths are agape because you look and you go, my God, that's Kiss. And Kiss is timeless and ageless and should be.
And let's face it, there aren't too many bands out there that have been able to consistently do sellout tours. Rolling Stones, maybe, Aerosmith, Motley Crue. Some of your contemporaries are still out there doing this stuff. But the super band concept, is that something under the new economic model that you can see happening for bands in the future? Will we see big bands like that again?
More than ever, there is a need for those supergroups, and that's why people keep gravitating back to them. When you see a band that's been around, you know what you're going to get. When you go to see Kiss, there's a guarantee that you're going to get your money's worth. You're seeing a band that has built its craft over 35 years. When we first started out, you started as the opening act. A tour or two later, you became the second act. By the time you headlined, you damn well knew how to headline. Nowadays, the downfall of a lot of bands is that they have a hit album and aren't prepared to go play an arena, and shouldn't be. It takes time to learn that craft. So you may buy an album by a new act. The chances of you spending hard-earned money to go see them versus going to see something that's tried and true, I'm betting on the tried and true band, and that's why people come to see us.
I want to hear everybody here. I want to hear you say, hey!
And you've been able to put out music and consistently still be at the top of the Billboard charts. But when you look at the top 10 consistently now over the past year or so, a lot of it is dance music. And dance music is also starting to impact the sound of some of these other genres, including rock and roll, R&B and soul music. What is it going to take to keep rock and roll alive?
Rock and roll is alive and very healthy. Whether or not it's found on the charts in the numbers that it once was, we certainly are not suffering at all. Interestingly, sometimes people talk about the 70s being like our big years, and it's laughable. Those years are eclipsed by multitudes, by the business we do now. In the last 10 years, we've been on the cover of Forbes. So it has transcended being rock music, but nonetheless, whether you look at a U2 or Stones or McCartney, rock and roll is alive and well. I don't know that there's room at the top quite the way there once was. And I think that a lot of the dance music is expendable, quite honestly, because it's interchangeable. You can virtually take any one of those tracks and take one of 10 singers and put it on, and it doesn't really change it. So is it successful? Yeah. Is it serving a purpose? Absolutely. Will it stand the test of time? The genre might, but I don't think that necessarily most of those artists will.
Does it bother you that most of the artists are not playing instruments?
I'm bothered by very little at this point in my life. I find it troublesome that when people go to see an act live, they're not seeing something live. They're seeing it live, I should correct it, they're not hearing it live. Is that person up there dancing around? Absolutely. Are they singing? Not a chance. Is the band playing? Hardly. You could virtually have the band walk off stage, have the singer walk off stage, and just keep that music playing. So that's bothersome to me only because I think people deserve more. People deserve more than just a show. They deserve passion. They deserve real sweat. They deserve commitment. And that's the kind of music I grew up listening to. So I think that the people miss out. They may enjoy it, but there's a lot more to be had.
You mentioned being on the cover of Forbes. You and your partner, Gene, have really kind of taken ownership of this ownership concept. Not necessarily always the mythology of a rock person to think about business in the way that you have done it, but you've been out front in terms of the vision for KISS and crafting the business strategy of KISS.
And proudly so.
And why is that? Because
I think that the caricature of a rock musician or a rock star is folly. It may appeal to the critic or the journalist because they get to live vicariously by seeing somebody living dangerously or stupidly. But it's usually things that they would never do themselves. I think it's sad, and I would rather further the notion that music and business go hand in hand, because if they don't, somebody else will be making your money for you. So I don't think that it negates or takes away from the commitment or love that I have for music. The fact that people want merchandise and the fact that we're the most merchandised band in history, I take a lot of pride in that. When other bands might have a problem with it, quite honestly, at the end of the day, it's because they're jealous. They do well to figure out what makes KISS so appealing. The fact that they want a t-shirt with me on it versus some guy who looks like the boy next door, maybe you need to glam up a bit, do something that's interesting, and then you should reap the rewards.
It really reminds me of Kurt Cobain, who obviously was the leader of the grunge movement, but he was very much so involved in the business. As much as his persona kind of projected that he wasn't, he very much was.
Well, it's funny because when you look at some of the quote-unquote heroes of credible rock and roll and what have you, you see somebody on stage in torn-up jeans. Well, those torn-up jeans are a costume, just like I wear a costume. When they get on their private jet, they're not one of you. They're not, they're not going home in a van. They're multi-millionaires. I'm an entertainer in the proudest sense of the word. And I'm also a businessman in the proudest sense of the word. There's money to be made, and it damn well deserves to go into the pocket of the guy who made it.
And when we wrap up, I really want to ask you about the future. You have this album that you're producing with KISS, 2012, a tour. Tell me what you see the future looking like for KISS and for Paul Stanley.
My future is like the last 10 or 15 years of my life, or 20 years of my life. It's a story I couldn't write better. It is something that I've worked at, but it is the American dream on all levels. The success, I'm married to an incredible woman. I have fabulous children, and I have this career doing what I did in school because I loved it. I played guitar in bands when I was in junior high school. I'm still doing it today. I am still drawing guitars on paper, only now they're manufactured. You know, now there's $13 million in sales of guitars that I draw. Life in the future will be more of the same. It's, there's this great foundation that I built, that KISS has allowed, that will stand for anything that I choose to put on top of it. I'm just building this monument, but it's really a monument maybe to the public. So my life is really about polishing the diamond. You know, it's my life is a gem. So anything at this point is just a way of making it sparkle more. Whether it's the next KISS album, which is arguably going to be the best album we've done.
Why?
Because we're a band now of 4 guys who get along great, who are geared towards making the band great. You can't succeed at your best by saying, how can the band make me more successful? You have to think, how can I make the band more successful? What's best for me will play out when the band is more successful.
Is that something that you knew when you started out, or did you have to learn that over the years?
You learn that over time. You learn it the hard way. I think you learn what a great partnership is and what a great working relationship with a band is. To me, a great working relationship is based on knowing what its limitations are. If you don't expect something from someone that they can't give you, you'll never be disappointed. The key to a great relationship is keeping it realistic. If you want something that that partner can't give you, get it elsewhere.
Spoken like a true band leader of one of the most successful bands in the history of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Paul
Pleasure.
Stanley from KISS. Thank you.